I've always rejected reality in an exceedingly friendly way. Which I'm like, that's such a very Kama way to put it. Hello and welcome. You're listening to the TWGOKcast, The World God in Leo's reread and rewatch podcast. I'm Aquason.
And I'm Magile.
And today we are discussing the Conquest Break in-between arcs, like mini 2-chapter arc, the Elsie Cake Arc. Also, I guess you could call it coupling with. That's what the anime episode's called, at least. So, before we start, I typically ask a question to you, Magile, and you have a question for me, unless you don't have a question this time.
Nope, I don't have one, but, if I think of one while you're asking your question, I'll be sure to ask it. Alright.
My question for you, Magile, is, do you like sweet foods?
They're fine.
Fine? What kind of sweet foods do you like?
I eat candy. Like, we just got off the back of Halloween at the time of recording this. Like a week away, because we're not actually that efficient at things. But, I eat candy if it's given to me. That's about it.
Alright. I like certain candies. I don't like things that are too sweet. And I don't like hot sweet things, like hot sweet pies. It doesn't fit right to me. I like a cold sweet thing.
I can agree with that. Like, I like cake. The cake is pretty good. Yeah, I'm sure the cake's not relevant at all in this chapter.
Okay. And you haven't come up with a second question. So, we'll just move on to talking about the episode. So, today's episode, / 2 chapters, is kind of an interesting little thing. The first, divergence between the anime version and the manga version is that the anime version has, a cold open, which is Mary, Kama's mom, and she's taking a shower, taking a bath, when, a mysterious, some kind of monster or something is lurking, and it's a cold open, and there's, a cake, which is kind of destroyed, that says, for, my brother, or whatever. But that is not really... This doesn't really amount to... It's not really that significant a divergence, because we get into the start of the episode chapter, which is Kama, Elsie, it's the morning, they're making a lot of noise, because Elsie has made him this bento lunchbox, let's say, which is still alive. It's this, squid tentacle monster thing. All you see from it is its tentacles and its eyes peeking out from the box. And Kama is like, what the hell is this monster? And Elsie is like, oh, it's your lunch. I stayed up from 6 to make this for you. And he's like, why is it still alive? And Elsie's like, oh, it'll still be, really fresh and still warm when you eat it. And because of this, Kama blows up on her and says, normally in, these types in stories and games, the side character, they'd have something, special or crazy unique about them. But you're useless. You're like a buggy game, Yeah, you bug demon. And, it crushes Elsie. So, when she's in school, she's, feeling really down about herself. And, that's when Chihiro, she's sitting beside her and is like, oh, what's wrong? So Elsie explains to Chihiro that, I'm really proud of my cooking and cleaning skills, but my brother, he's, he doesn't appreciate it, and and then Chihiro, she gives her, girly magazine, which has, this, recipe for strawberry shortcake to give, and be if you cook this for the Otomega, even he'll, appreciate it or whatever. And Elsie, she's enraptured by the red white. So She swears that she's gonna go make it. So she ditches class using a raiment doll, and she's in the home economics room. So in the home economics room, Elsie, she's preparing to follow the recipe to make the cake. And she gets all the ingredients, but they're all hell ingredients. Hell sugar, which is still alive. She considers various eggs, Nirvana quail, and one of the eggs turns out to grow, and it's pops out. It's this man-dragon, a combination of a mandrake and a dragon, which chases her out while she's beating the meringue. She runs outside. She manages to escape from the man-dragon, but then she comes across Kama, and like the cake isn't ready. She needs to hide this, but she's laughs maniacally as she tells him like, "Just you wait. Come to the kitchen or whatever later. I'll show you. You'll see the true power of little devil." And then we get, in the anime at least, a nice little musical montage of Elsie making her cake with the song. It's called "Oh My God." That's it. It's like "Oh My God" with a star, and it's a really cutesy little song, with a bunch of like funny kind of little side gags of Elsie like cooking a thing in the microwave by starting a bonfire and then suspending the microwave over it, or she like grows strawberries using like some magic and such. Anyway, she finishes the cake. She just needs to put the strawberries on. She's like super hyped, and she's imagining in her mind that Kama, he'll love the cake and he'll be so impressed with her. And then the man-dragon's back and he eats the strawberries, and she screams. And then all the unused eggs start hatching. She speculates that it's because of the fire. It warmed them all up, and she like panics and she's like, "This cake is not for you." And then in the anime, at least, the microwave, which is still suspended over the bonfire, explodes, destroying the home economics classroom and like kind of ruining her cake. Then in the manga version, what happens is, as Elsie is like desperately trying to fix the cake, Kama shows up, and like she's despondent. She's really upset. Kama kind of wordlessly walks up to her, eats all the cake, and then like tells her like, sorry, right? He apologizes. Yeah, he apologizes.
Yeah,
right?
But how he shouldn't have been. Yeah, shouldn't have been as mean in the morning.
And then he also says, he hates sweet things, and he walks away. And Elsie, she's kind of touched, and she goes with him. It's like saying something. I forget exactly. And that's the manga version. Now, after we've seen this perspective, the story in the next chapter and in the second half of the episode continues with Kama's perspective.
Yep. So it runs us back to the very beginning. It goes back to the bug demon scene. It shows a repeat of what's going on from Kama's perspective. We get a bit more insight as to what he is thinking on things. And then we go through the same day, of course, but we follow his perspective of Kama. So we go back into the classroom, and he's thinking about the interactions with Elsie in the morning, on things. Oh, and then the Mr. Kodama, the teacher for the day, hands back the tests for the day, and he's calling on Kama to come get his test. And Kama's playing his games like normal. And Mr. Kodama gets very upset at that he's not putting focus into the into learning, and wants Kama to stop playing his games. But Kama's like, "Oh, I'm putting 100% focus into both things, because he's playing his games and he's still got 100% on the test." And Mr. Kodama still gets mad at him, of course, but Kama's just like, "Why? I did great still. This shouldn't be a problem if I play my games." So, yeah. So after that scene, we have Kama out, and it crosses over to a point in the Elsie arc where we saw her running out with her holding her. What's the bowl? That's the bowl.
Meringue?
Bowl of meringue. Except, Kama doesn't know what it is, and he has a quick run-in with the man-dragon. And then, we catch things from Kama's perspective where Elsie's like, oh, you'll see my true power. And he's just like, okay. And he doesn't really, care that much, but he wants to know what's going on. Then after that part, we get to the next class, which is PE, where the actual teacher is out for the day. So Mr. Kodama's taken over once again, and he tells all the students to do 20 laps. So everyone begins running, and of course, Keima's not particularly good.
What a horrible senpai.
Yeah, truly, truly terrible. Yeah, so he's running aside Keima at one point. He's like, see, this is why you need to put less focus in games, And he's like, just so you know, whoever finishes last has to do 20 more laps. But if you apologize for this morning, I'll cut it down to 10. And Keima's like, oh, he tries to take it as a challenge. He pulls out his PFP and starts playing. And he's like, I'm powering up because he's the god of conquest. And he starts running super fast, only to immediately fall flat on his face. And, Kurama's like, this is wrong. People who don't know the difference between games and reality, they all end up as criminals. And Keima's like, I games are games, reality is reality, okay? It's only the people who get them confused as a problem. I separate for Keima. He knows the difference, and he knows reality is nothing like a game. That's how he knows they're not he doesn't get them confused. So then we split out into the last part of the story here, where we have in the manga, Keima goes to the home ec room for the interaction with Elsie there that was described. So he eats the cake at that time. Whereas in the anime, he starts heading home, I believe. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, yeah. And he's heading inside. He's heading home, and on his way inside, he passes by a cake with the to my brother sign from Elsie. And he's like, "Oh, is this what Elsie was talking about?" And then the anime is set up in a weird way where it's actually like 5 parts, weirdly enough, and that's the end of the 3rd part.
He goes inside because his PFP is like, oh, I got a time event. Yatta!
Oh, yeah, time event. Because then we see things from Mari's perspective next.
Correct.
Yes. And we get her interaction with the man-dragon from the opening again, and now we have more context to what was going on there. But, afterwards, after the interaction in the bathroom, seeing it, she's like, oh, I need to go put a stop to that peeping Tom. So she walks outside with her towel, and she's like, and she hears something fall off, and she's like, oh, it's not a peeping Tom. Maybe it's a thief. So she's inching around the corner, and she sees someone. She's like, okay, I gotta do something. So she grabs a plant, and then nails them with it, but it turns out to be Keima, who we see had the cake from Elsie.
Yeah, seems like he was eating it.
Mm-hmm. And then we get the last perspective. And it's of the man-dragon going on. We see so one of the things that came up is Mr. Kama got upset at Keima was going to do a parent-teacher conference thing with Mari. So he was on the way over to the Katsuragi household, and he sees the man-dragon on top of the house and is like, oh no. And then the callback from the morning, we have the bento box that Elsie made that has the tentacles. It crawls up on top of the house, and Kodama just sees the lunchbox just eat the entire man-dragon in one bite, and he just runs away. He's like, I'm not dealing with that.
That is correct. And that is the end of the anime version. So, where should we start? Do you have any notes?
So I guess this is a thing. I think looking into the anime as a whole, I think it's kind of weird they decided to, I wouldn't say completely rewrite the story, but kind of change, like, the entire pace of it and set it into, these more separate perspectives than it needed. this might be a pretty cynical take, but I feel like the vibe behind it, since this was pretty early into TWGOK's lifespan, is the like, hey, this episode is kind of boring. Can we put some, fan service in the episode to try to make it more appealing? That's just the vibe I got from it, which is why, the first thing we see is Mari bathing in the anime.
Yes.
I don't know if you have any particular thoughts on that.
This episode is probably the most fan service heavy episode of TWGOK, or like of any TWGOK chapter, it feels like.
Yeah.
So there's some interesting. I have some interesting notes about this episode. The anime episode was actually written by Tamiki Wakak.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he was the scriptwriter for it because, he offered to do it kind of like casually because the main screenwriter guy, he was like really busy writing scripts for all the other episodes in season 1, and because Wakaki is the original creator of the manga, right? His expansion of it, people would be like, yeah, he's the original author. Like, there's more creative, like, acceptance of that,
Mm-hmm.
And, there's actually some interesting stuff. I'm gonna, instead of doing this as, like, individual notes, I guess I'll just talk about the blog post Wakaki wrote around the time when he did it. So in that blog post, for example, he posts the text file that was, like, the first draft of the script that he wrote, and it's pretty close to the final result, although there are some changes. And he talks about that in the original manga chapter, what he originally wanted to do was tell sort of like a complex kind of story of like intersecting perspectives where one thing turns out to have affected another thing, and then this explains this other thing that happened, kind of like
a Rube Goldberg machine of events.
Sure. Or like his comparison is like certain visual novels and adventure games of like the 90s era, which like had some really complicated plot lines, which end up being really compelling when the pieces come together, because you're like, oh, it turns out this thing was affecting this other thing, and that's why this character was there at this time doing this thing. But as he was writing the first chapter and then the second chapter, he realized that the 17 pages that he had to work with in both chapters is way too little to do like anything super big in scope, right? It can't be that like intricate. So the end result, after like going back and forth with his editor and stuff, ultimately ended up being a very simple version of the story where it's just one side's perspective, then the other side's perspective, right? So when he gets the opportunity to sort of try a different version of the story in the anime version, he comes up with like, there are 3 kinds of ways that you can tell like a multi-perspective story. You can have like these adventure games, Eve and Desire. I've never actually played them, but he's talking about them as like games where you literally go through one character's route, and then you play through another character's route, and then those tell complete stories, but then the intersection of it ends up like telling like a greater whole. And maybe at the end after that, you'll have like a third or an extra character's perspective, which will link everything together, right? That's like the big one. Then he's talked about this other adventure game called Machi, which literally just means town. And this one is about where, instead of telling like a full complete story from one character's perspective, first, and then another full character's story next, it's like you tell a character's story part way, then you go back and you tell another character's story part way, and then another character's story part way, and then, you then pick up from like the first guy or the second guy or whatever, and then you tell the story like that. And you show how the characters end up intersecting, crossing paths with each other. And then the final one he used is Pulp Fiction. And he's like, you can also tell a multi-character perspective story by putting it in like non-chronological order and kind of shifting perspectives to show multiple sides of one kind of overall thing. So he ended up choosing, like, I kind of want to do like a pulp fiction kind of thing. And so that's why the cold opening of the episode features the sort of out of context kind of mystery element of what's happening. Although, and also why in the anime, when we follow Elsie's perspective, we actually do follow her back home, and we see things like Keima has a bandage on his head, and Mari, she's on the phone talking to Kodama, talking about like a cancelled parent-teacher conference meeting. And then at that point, Keima tells her that, he doesn't like sweets, and she throws away the magazine. So it's kind of interesting what Wakaki was kind of going for in this. I feel like the expanded content to this story is, like, I don't want to say bad in a way that's just, like, reductive, but I feel like it's also, it doesn't hit, like, the emotional beats as much as that I think it could have if you were trying to, like, expand on this story.
Yeah, so I was definitely thinking on this after, reading the chapters and watching the anime back to back. The anime felt a lot more just like the stuff that was added on was kind of just like fluff. I feel like it didn't really contribute much to what the overall story was trying to get across. Like all the stuff with Kodama and Mari that was added just kind of felt like it was just there, as opposed to, actually contributing to the narrative between Keima and Elsie. So I think in some way, I actually kind of feel like I like the manga better for these chapters and episode.
Because it's, like, more focused, you'd say.
Yeah. And I think, like, one of the things I think is weird between the two is in the manga, Elsie actively sees Keima, eat what's left of the cake at the time. Whereas in the anime, Elsie's just like, oh, I'll do better one day, and then Keima's just like, oh, I don't like sweets, and then she just kind of storms off. I like the more direct Keima actually doing something nice for Elsie.
Yeah, it's a little less. Sorry, go on.
I was saying in the manga, we do also get the weird scene of Elsie licking the frosting off of Keima's cheek. That was a bit weird, but
So I guess we can talk about this like in as like a broader thing. So the manga is interesting because we're taking place, volume 2. This is volume 2, right? Volume 2 of TWGOK, and we're still in this kind of period where Elsie is kind of set up as a potential love interest for Keima, right? This is before the Elsie date arc, which kind of like ends that. And in Mio's arc, for example, in the manga version, she's jealous of Keima, like romancing Mio, like at that dance, which gets cut from the anime, right? Because they have a better idea of what the ultimate like end result of what Keima and Elsie's relationship is going to be. This episode for the anime, like with the fan service-y kind of elements for Mary's perspective, I think I could agree that it's like part of like them trying to spice up an episode which ultimately doesn't have a ton of heavy substance to it. I think the things that I like about Mary's perspective are sort of that internal monologue we get to see of how she feels about Keima, which is kind of interesting to me. Like how she talks about how she's worried about him because he's, very strange. And she talks about how she, at the end, like, she's worried about what his future will be, but she also sort of accepts it or accepts him as he is, because when she was a teenager or whatever, she was, a delinquent, not a very good kid as well, and she turned out fine. So she doesn't feel like she should stress too much about it at the same time. And then also in the anime, there's that part in Elsie's perspective when she's talking to Kodama, and she's like, she's like, oh, she's very sarcastic in the way that she actively like really does not like a Kodama complaining about her son. Like later on, we see when she gets the phone call, and then at the end, in Elsie's perspective, she's like, "Oh yes, you can't come. Oh, that's so unfortunate. Get a lot of rest." And then she does the anime, or No, sorry. She does the Japanese thing where she pulls her eye and goes, bleh.
Okay. Do we want to move on to more random notions from the episode?
Yeah, I hit a lot of the things that I wrote down. So, I should just start from the top then, of the things that I didn't hit already. So, in the anime, for example, one thing that I found interesting is that, when Keima is telling Elsie that she's like a buggy game, she's a bug demon, they explicitly draw a connection to the Sora arc, like they use a shot of Sora, and I thought that was really good because it it makes these like episodes and like the quote unquote filler episodes or the breathing episodes feel more like they're part of this sequential like overarching story of things that have happened, right?
Yeah, I think you can go ahead.
No, just go.
Oh, okay. That's okay. Yeah. So I think in regards to that, another thing I think is interesting is, on the topic of the song that came that Elsie sings in the episode. I feel like it's kind of like a tie-in to the previous arc with Canon about how she kind of wants to be an idol, and we get her with a song in this episode. I feel like that's a good tie-in to what in an episodic way of her having a song of her own.
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of that. But yeah, it's also really a nice song. I really like it.
It was okay.
Wakaki's blog talks about how this is like the third appearance of Chihiro, and it's interesting to me because Wakaki's blog, this is the first time that he introduces her by name as Chihiro Kasaka. And apparently his editor at the time really liked Chihiro, which is as we get into Chihiro arc, this will be like part of the reason why her story arc comes so soon, relatively in the lifespan of TWGOK. Do you want to hear something really stupid?
Yes.
Okay. Because of this episode, when Elsie like finishes her cake and she goes like, "Yay, I did it! Clap, clap, clap." I say clap, 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 or I type it as like an applause response to people, as like a casual sort of, not necessarily sarcastic, but sort of like, yes, you did it, clap, 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 instead of actually clapping or anything.
On the topic of just random nonsense from this episode, this gave us the crying Elsie meme, I'd say, that is vaguely popular.
The image macro, yeah, or like the screen cap.
Mm-hmm.
That is a classic. Also, speaking of like random visual thing, I love that in the anime, like when Elsie is imagining Keima like liking the cake she made, in the anime they made it so that the little like chibi drawings are little like drawings on popsicle sticks. Like, so in her mind, she's imagining like a little puppet show. It's very funny. Another thing I will say is that in the anime, the reason why there's a big explosion, they explain it as Elsie set the microwave over the bonfire and she never took it down, and so that like overheating the microwave ends up exploding the home ec room. And I thought that was like a clever sort of way to bring like a joke that was just happening as part of the background in the song into a thing like, oh, here's a callback to that, or here's a Chekhov's gun or whatever, and that's why it explodes.
I don't know. I want to call the Mythbusters in on this one. I don't think hanging a microwave of that size over a fire would cause nearly as large of an explosion as it did. I think it's completely unrealistic.
Maybe. Oh, that reminds me. Speaking of trivial callbacks, in this episode, you're going to be blown away by this, Magile, okay? You better get ready to rate this a 10 out of 10. In this episode, Elsie talks about Nirvana quail eggs as a potential, like, egg she might need to use. And then in season 2 of TWGOK, when Aqua is there, and Elsie, before Aqua arrives, and Elsie is trying to look at up the manual to how to catch runaway spirits, and she says, "Oh, it's a cookbook, right?" When she looks at the thing, in the like 3-frame screen pause you can see of the Hellion text, which is ciphered English, the text for the cookbook is a egg drop soup that uses Nirvana quail eggs. And it's like, wow, this detail, you could have just made it random gibberish, but you actually made it use not just actual, like, a food recipe, but you did some in-universe stuff where it uses a random one-use term of, like, a animal product, animal dish that Elsie mentioned. Good on you, Man Globe.
Oh my god.
Yes. I think my last thing I will say is that I never noticed that at the 17 minutes and 54 seconds mark, we actually get to see a shot of Mary's motorcycle in the yard. I thought that was just a thing that Wakaki wrote, but was cut in the final script, because part of it is there. She was, like, working on her motorcycle, and that's why she's dirty, and that's why she ends up taking a bath, right? Before the parent-teacher conference that she's got to attend. I think it would have been a little more effective, a little more interesting as, like, illustrating part of Mary's, like, more developed character if we could have seen her, like, you know, mechanicking on her bicycle rather than just the shot of the bicycle and her, like, kind of being finished, but not in a way that was very, like, overtly easy to tell.
I like that you're calling it a bicycle.
It's a motorcycle, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Am I wrong? Should I
There's
say
different
bike?
Connotations.
Alright. My Canadian English, apparently.
Okay. Because I was going to comment on one last thing, and, you know, I think it's fitting in the anime ending theme. I believe it's just sung by Elsie this episode, right? I'm not crazy.
Oh, you mean Koi no Shushi?
Yeah.
Like, it's the regular ending theme, but because depending on which arc, it changes who the singer is going to be.
Oh, well, don't they all sing at some point? Am I crazy?
I know, for example, the first time it's Ayumi. And I think at Mio arc, it's only Mio. Shiori, I don't know which episode it's only Shiori. And I don't know what episode is only canon. But I'm pretty sure that's what they do.
Okay, because this episode was just Elsie. I'm not crazy about that. I'm taking it. Okay. Because we haven't been commenting on the ending that much. It's a good ending theme. That's why I was like, okay, this is just the Elsie. This is the Elsie ending version.
I think it's interesting how the production company behind TWGOK, like the CD parts of it, the music soundtracks, they specifically, like, created, like, multiple versions with different, like, musical arrangements for all the different girls to sing as, like, things they can include on the music character CDs. So, like, if you bought the Elsie one, you don't just get, like, her song, Oh My God, which was played here. Please buy it now, you know, as, like, part of their advertising. You also get a version of Koi no Shurushi, which has a unique sort of poppy, kind of starry kind of instrumental to it. And it's just interesting how much they did to try to differentiate and to give interesting value to these CDs.
And it's good because TWGOK has good music, as it turns out.
Mm-hmm. I think that is everything I really wanted to say. All I have left is that I've always liked the Crunchyroll subtitle translation where they say, I've always rejected reality in an exceedingly friendly way. Which I'm like, that's such a very Kama way to put it. Because, like, he ignores reality, and then that's to him, like, oh yeah, you know, I've never done it with any malice. It's always been very friendly how I ignored reality. Yeah, and that's everything. Do you want to go to rating and not rating?
Yes. How wouldn't you rate this episode?
I will say that this episode is probably my least favorite TWGOK episode, and I will say that I'm, like, not a fan of the overt fan service of it. But I think that it's good that TWGOK has these breather episodes. I wouldn't have cut it, and I think that the elements, I can still find value in the elements of, like, exploring Mary's sort of strange relationship that she has with the fact that her son is so antisocial and weird and nerdy, you know? So, Uh, I've read people's perspectives that say that they prefer the manga version over the anime version because it's, Keima very directly tries to make it up to Elsie, and like she sees that and responds in a way. And I think, to me, maybe it's hard. I like the anime version a lot for the song and for some of the ways that they make the comedy a little more aligned with each other. Like the way that the explosion happens because of the microwave being suspended over the fire. I thought that was really funny. So I can't really rate either one above each other, but this is probably my least favorite TWGOK anime episode, and as one of the filler kind of arcs, it's okay.
And I would give the episode and manga a C for cake.
Alright. And that's everything?
That's all I gotta say.
Alright. So, thank you, Magile. It was great talking to you about this episode. I don't know when the next episode will come out, or when this episode will come out, because we record, and then sometimes it takes a long-ass time for me to release the next one. But I hope you'll join us next time when we talk about the Shiori arc.
Make sure you follow us on Blue Sky, the new popular website for following people.
That better not date us, immensely. Oh my god.
We'll find out eventually.
Don't follow me on Blue Sky. I don't post anything. Alright. It's good talking to you, Magile. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.